Time now for Lions Central. Here's Brandon Alishaglu and Nick Kostora.
All right, folks, welcome to the first installment of Detroit Lions Radio Central, or Lions Central Radio, I guess is what we'll actually be calling it. Anyways, my name is Brandon Alishaglu. I'm here along with my co-host, Nick Kostora. Let's say hi, Nick.
Everybody, good to see you. Good to be on the radio. Brandon, I'm excited to get this.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I'm glad they had this great idea to have one podcast for one team. Should be fun. We've got an hour. It's all Lions. I mean, we might make fun of some other teams. We'll probably make fun of the Lions, but we should enjoy it, and hopefully you will too. To get us kicked off today, we're going to go ahead and start with news and notes from the minicamp that just wrapped up. The first thing that's probably on at least the forefront of everybody's mind, or it should be, is Luis Delmas has not been on the field yet. I don't know how much you followed this, but obviously he didn't play much last season due to knee injuries. He's still not out there. How concerned are you, Nick?
Obviously, with Delmas, it's someone that you have to always be concerned about because of that injury history. I mean, they're being a little tight-lipped right now. We're not exactly sure how serious this is, but if we find out that Delmas can't go, they're turning to Don Carey, and I'm not sure if that's someone we're too excited to see them turn to with how bad the secondary was as a whole last season. I see Delmas as someone that's a kind of a bright spot, someone that we see growing with this team, and it was exciting to see him come back this offseason when a lot of people thought he'd be leaving. So I am concerned. I want to see him on the field because it's so rare that we actually do see him on the field consistently.
Agreed. I mean, the big thing to me is that he's getting testy with the media. I can understand frustration over injuries, frustration with dealing with the constant questions all the time. I mean, look what happens any time Tebow's brought up or a team brings him in. Bill Belichick is already upset with the media.
And just so our listeners know, this will not be a Tebow show, so don't worry about that. But go ahead, Brandon.
That should be the last mention. I swear to Tebow. Anyways,
right.
Anyways, Delmas getting irritable with the media, though, kind of makes me think there's an underlying frustration about him not getting out there to where, I don't know, maybe something's really, really wrong here. I mean, I know we have modern science and everything else, but the kid's not on the field. Or the man, I should probably call him, sorry. But the man is still not on the field, and without him, like you said, they're turning to Carey. I mean, that's horrendous, and it also takes what looked to be a strength coming into this 2013 campaign, the secondary, and it puts a huge hole back there. And you know what else? It kind of seems like the death knell for Amari Spivey. I mean, if he's not even the one getting those reps, that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, we've only seen him really in that nickel coverage role, and we thought at least I thought it was just because there was players ahead of him that they liked. And if they're turning to Don Carey right now instead of Amari Spivey, it makes you wonder what they think of him, if there is potential for an every down player there. I thought there was when they drafted him. I thought that was something they were going to groom him to be, and this is definitely a scary thing to see.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, the next note we'll go ahead and hit on is the right tackle battle is still extremely murky. You have Corey Hilliard and Jason Fox are still exchanging first-team reps. And granted, we're not talking these guys aren't in pads. They're not exactly being physical with any defenders or anything like that. But the fact that we still have zero idea going into training camp, it makes me a little nervous. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I'm not too worried about this one because Fox is someone that we haven't seen on the field before, so it makes sense that if they do want him to be the starter, they're going to give him plenty of reps alongside Hilliard, who's, I guess, more of an established presence. I think Fox is who they want to be the guy, but it's hard to put faith in him because, like Delmas, he's always hurt. So they're going to they're not going to declare him the starter before the guys even put pads on in the offseason. They want to see him in pads. They want to see him get contact. If he does show up when the pads are put on, I have to think Fox is the one they want to see win this job.
I definitely want Fox to be the man that wins this job, and it's mostly because this is the Detroit Lions. Injuries seem to happen to everybody except for the now departed Jeff Backus. And Corey Hilliard is one of those guys that you could play anywhere on the line, it seems like, and he can fill in at least admirably. There's going to be obviously a drop-off, but he's a steady presence on an unsteady line. That's what you want.
And you want to be able to have him in that versatile role where you can plug him in where you need him. And they drafted Fox in hopes that he would become a starter. It's time for him to step up.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the next situation that's actually, at least it's a spot of good news for us, is Ryan Broyles is apparently feeling good. He's been out on the field for 2 days now, running around, cutting. He's quoted as saying he doesn't have any complaints so far. I mean, he's integral, I think, to this offense. We'll hit on with Chris Burke, who is from Sports Illustrated, who we'll be bringing on just a little bit. But if we have Broyles, this offense can be fantastic. How important is Ryan Broyles to you?
To me, Ryan Broyles is everything because we need that slot weapon. I mean, I don't like a lot of the receivers behind Broyles on the depth chart, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But Broyles, we need that short yardage, that middle yardage receiver for Stafford to turn to. Broyles is that guy. He's sure-handed. He runs great routes. I mean, if he's not healthy, where do they turn to for that third receiver, that slot weapon? Are we going to see Reggie Bush lining up in the slot? I mean, that's not where we want Reggie Bush. We want him in the backfield. We need Broyles to be at 100% because he could be the cog that really makes this offensive engine go.
Well, and that's another thing that was actually brought up is they're using Reggie Bush everywhere. So, I mean, yeah, having Bush out there in the slot a few times a game, I'm definitely a fan of having him in the slot consistently. That's not what we brought him here for. At least I don't. Right.
You don't want to force him to only be in that role. We need Broyles on the field.
Yeah, I agree. And well, hopefully this is just the start of a long, healthy streak for him. The next thing we wanted to hit on was there was a list put out by Paula Pash of the Oakland Press, and she was talking about 5 standouts from OTAs. Granted, those were last week, but still figured it was germane to hit on. One of the players that she was talking about, or at least the second one she talked about, was Ron Bartell. Now, this guy, I don't know how much you know about him. He played a little bit late last season. But he's a 9-year veteran. I mean, you would think that, this might be a Don Kelly situation. The guy's older than dirt, comes on all of a sudden, and he's actually going to contribute. They're talking about him starting.
And that's interesting to think about him starting. I mean, it's obviously an open competition right now, but is Bartell someone that can start over a Bentley, a Slay? I don't know. I mean, Houston obviously has the one side locked down. So on the other side, the more competition I see, the better. Why not? Bentley and Slay are obviously really young guys. Maybe Bartell can teach them something. I'm not sure what, but let them compete. Don't let Bentley or Slay don't let them think that the job is theirs. Bring Bartell in and let's see what he can do.
Well, and another player that they're talking about in that slot that's been playing well is Jonta Green. I mean, he's the one that played the most out of all those, the 3 guys that were drafted last year.
Yeah.
But I feel like he's the one that's had the least amount of hype coming into this year.
Yeah, he does seem to be consistently overlooked, and there is talent to a Jonta Green. I guess I'm one of the people that overlooks him as well. I get more excited talking about Bill Bentley and Darius Slay, but Green wasn't terrible when the Lions did turn to him.
Well, and that's, I mean, when you spend a second-round pick on Darius Slay, kid with a bunch of talent and the injuries, we want him on the field. I like Bentley. He's a big physical presence and, all that. Mm-hmm. There's some makings there. There's some building blocks there, but it's Lions. I'm not getting my hopes up on any cornerbacks actually, coming up with what they're worth.
It's risky business to get too excited about any of these cornerbacks, but it's going to be fun to watch them compete.
Well, and the last one I wanted to mention from that list was Stephen Miller. This kid is, I barely knew anything about him until I saw this list, went and looked up a little bit about him. This kid's apparently a crazy freak. I mean, he's 5'7", has a 43-inch vertical, and they're talking about him being a kick returner. I don't know where this kid came from, but I guess we know he came from Appalachian State, which I know it's still a bad word in Michigan. But there's a good chance you can push Michael Spurlock for that spot.
Why not? I mean, I'm with you. I didn't know much about this kid, but looking at that vertical leap, that 43-inch, let's see what this kid can do. I mean, Michael Spurlock is an interesting player as well to bring in, but that vertical leap is exciting. He's young. Let's have a competition for that spot. And, I mean, whatever he can do, it's better than what we got out of Stephen Logan last year, so more power to him.
True. I mean, these guys are lightning in a bottle. Very few are ever consistently good and make an actual career a la Devin Hester. Mm-hmm. But if this kid could come in for a year or two, show that kind of burst that that 43-inch vertical would seem to attest, oh, hey, get him through a hole. Maybe we're starting at the 35 more consistently than, the 20 or the 22 or wherever they'll end up being. But go ahead.
That was just such a consistent problem last year, was our starting position because of our kick return game. And this kid, he's fast. He's got that vertical. I'm excited to see him.
Well, and that brings us around to the other two guys who were signed the last couple of weeks here. Offensive lineman Leroy Harris and Jake Scott. I'm not exactly excited about either of them. I mean, Jake Scott, 32 years old, and Leroy Harris, he started 8 games last year, and he's a decent run blocker, but he was a terrible pass protector, and he's coming off an ACL injury. It's hard to get too excited.
I can't see much out of this other than roster filler. We were talking about how we like Hilliard to be that he's not great at anything, but he's versatile enough to do a little bit of everything. I can't see where these two fit in doing much of anything at all. I mean, you mentioned Harris. He's a decent run blocker in his day, but he's coming off an injury. No one wanted to touch him. Jake Scott, there's not much here to get too excited about.
Yeah, and that pretty much wraps up all the offensive notes there and the recent acquisitions. Now, the place we want to transition now is, well, hopefully Detroit's forte. It has been in the past when they were decent. Well, hey, playoff appearance, I guess that's great in Detroit. It's the defensive line. I mean, we've been in the Detroit Lions and Martin Mayhew and Jim Schwartz have invested so much into that defensive line. 2 first-round picks, constant signings, all kinds of stuff. It's looking like things are actually turning around along that front, and it's not who you would think is coming out to be the leader, or at least these first through minicamp. It's been Nick Fairley.
Yeah,
jumping around.
Yeah, you gotta be cautiously optimistic with what you're hearing about this out of Fairley, but it's exciting. We hear he's playing with a lot of passion. He's not afraid to challenge his teammates. I mean, Sue is the unquestioned leader of that defensive line now that Vanden Bosch is gone. But if Fairley wants to challenge him for that role, maybe bring out the best in both of them, as long as he keeps his passion directed in the right way, I can't see any negatives to a more aggressive Nick Fairley.
Well, you're being guardedly optimistic, and I can respect that. I'm bursting at the seams about this one because Sue's been talking a lot over the past few months about being the leader, and he strikes me more as the more silent type, do it by example type. And I could be completely wrong on that. That's just an impression from afar. Yeah. But Nick Fairley, if he wants to be the one, the challenging teammates in practice things and not challenge him to fight, but come on, I'm going to whip your butt on this play. That's an element that I'm not sure the team has had, and with the loss of Vanden Bosch, I don't know if I'd call it a loss. He's an aging pass rusher who doesn't rush the passer anymore.
There's definitely a leadership element that they're losing with him, though.
Exactly. He's filling that void, or he's showing people how to practice, and, this is a first-round pick. This is exactly what you want out of him. Granted, it's a year later, but I'm fine with that. Better late than never. Yeah,
he's a first-round pick just like Sue was. I think everyone we think of Sue as the more important guy, but it's really not true. We need Nick Fairley to be the leader just as much as we need it out of Sue, and hopefully Fairley's passion can bring even more out of Sue that we haven't heard about this offseason. It'd be nice to start hearing that he's getting back at Fairleigh, and they're kind of going at each other and bringing out the best in each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It could be, reminiscent of the Minnesota Vikings of the past decade with the Williams brothers in the middle, the Williams wall or whatever.
Oh, boy, you are excited about this, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm probably a little too excited, but, it's the off-season, it can't hurt. But
okay.
But that brings us around to the player I'm most excited about now, in the future, everything. Ezekiel Ansah, who, here's the third first-round pick they've invested in that defensive line.
Yeah.
But all of the signs have been positive as they're talking about not just his attitude, which we kind of already had a grasp on before, that he's an eager learner and he seems to really enjoy everything that's going on, but he's learning the defense quickly, at least from everything I'm reading.
Yeah, I love what we're seeing from him so far with the team. That draft pick was one you knew they were going to make, and it's hard not to be worried about it because of that lack of experience. But everything we're seeing from this kid so far, and granted they haven't even put these pads on at all yet, but he's learning the defense quickly. He's learning how to play the speed of an NFL game. I am excited. I am, again, cautiously optimistic with this. It's the Lions. We have to be cautiously optimistic, but we need this defensive end, and Ansah is just such an exciting athlete. I want this to be true, what we're hearing about him right now.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I've written pretty extensively about him. I mean, when they drafted him, I gave the Lions an A for the pick. I mean, I was in love with it then. I'm still in love with it now. There's been the reports of him batting down passes are probably the most exciting thing to me. It's not something we equate him with. I mean, we knew he's a freak. We knew he's fast. We knew he's quick. And in the wide nine scheme, I mean, that's perfect for him because he doesn't have to think too much. He can just charge right up the field and try to put some pressure on that tackle's outside side. And that's all he really needs to do. But the fact that he's knocking down passes already, well, it shows that he's learning the game, learning some nuances. Now, obviously, he's not going to be, completely up to speed by the time the season starts, but these are some encouraging signs from a player that I think could very well be the key to the season, which is exactly what I wrote on Yahoo last week. Well,
yeah.
With that, I'm sorry, do you have one more thing?
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, that wraps up the news and notes that we have for today. What we do have right now is Chris Burke from Sports Illustrated. He'll be weighing in on the offense as we transition from the defensive line. So here we go. We have our first guest on. We have Chris Burke with us from SI.com. He also writes for Detroit Sports Site. Thanks again for coming on, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
And is there also a Twitter handle we can find you at?
Yeah, you can get me at Chris Burke _SI, and then the website at SI specifically is NFL.si.com, where all my stuff is there. So.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I'm already following, and I suggest everybody else does. For just among the multitudes of NFL guys out there, he's a good one to follow. All right, well, I figured I'd start. Seeing as this is our first interview, I did a bunch of Googling for about 5-10 minutes and skimmed some articles. And I found your, what was the 2012 season recap and an outlook for the off season. So we're looking through that, and one of the things that is on every fan's mind, I know for sure, is the offensive line. Obviously, there's a lot of starts that are being replaced, some better than others. I was just wondering how you felt about the offensive line as it is today compared to where it was at the end of the season.
I mean, I think that's really, I don't want to say that's the big mystery necessarily because I'm not entirely sure, how the secondary is going to look, how the linebackers might look, how the defensive line might look. But, I think in terms of a group that really needs to sort of overperform for this team to be as good as it could be, it's that offensive line, and certainly there's a bunch of questions. I think Riley Reese going to be a really good linemen in this league. Whether he's capable of stepping in Jeff Backus and playing left tackle and being successful, I don't know. I don't think the Lions know, which is why we sort of heard them linked to, offensive tackles in the draft and then even in free agency. So, but he's really the key. I mean, they know what they got in Dominic Raiola. They know what they've got in Rob Sims. I think Larry Warford is a guy that could step in and be really solid as a guard, especially if they're going to try and run the football. It's sort of what he does best. He can, kind of get up in there and mash a little bit. And so it's going to come down to those tackle spots, Reef, and then whoever wins the other one, whether it's Corey Hilliard or Jason Fox or some other guy that's not really in the mix quite yet.
Yeah, there's definitely question marks, especially on that right side. I mean, there's no real, leader in the clubhouse or the fan house as far as between Fox or Hilliard. And you have experience versus what supposedly is potential, but we haven't got to see any of it yet.
We keep hearing about that potential.
I loved Warford in the third. Like a lot of draft stocks went up and down, and for a while it looked like grabbing him in the second would have been a great move, but you have to love grabbing him in the third.
Yeah, he was a guy that we found out after the draft that the Rams had on their radar in the first round. So to get, like you said, to get him in the third is definitely a steal, especially because it's such a position of need for them, and kind of the other guys that are in the mix there. They have Bill Nagy, who they grabbed from the Cowboys, but he's coming off a totally lost year to injury, and there's not a whole lot of depth along that interior. So, I think Warford, we'll have to wait and see. It's always sort of touch and go with rookies, especially offensive linemen, rookies on the offensive line, but. The opportunity certainly should be there for Warford to come in and start.
Definitely.
Now, go ahead, Brandon.
I was just going to say we're going to find out quite a bit in that first week, considering they're going against what now it could very well be the best D-line in the league if everybody performs up to par in Minnesota.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, it's kind of curious to see just sort of exactly what the plan is for the offense. It should be a lot different. With Reggie Bush back there, obviously gives you a home run threat. It gives you that running game that team had for so long. So, especially against a team like that, like you mentioned, they play good pass rush and the run game, and using Bush on those screen passes and things like that. It's a nice way to slow down a pass rush. So I expect the Lions might take advantage of that right out of the gate, but. How successful can they be with a brand new offensive line, a new running back? I'm still not entirely sure who's going to be at wide receiver. There's a lot up in the air right now with the offense, as good as it looks on paper.
Now, you just touched on Reggie Bush. What do you see his role ultimately being? Is he going to be more of jack of all trades like he was in New Orleans, or do you the every down back that we saw?
I think it'll probably be more like what we saw in Miami. I think the Lions like McCown. They were happy with what they got in Joyce Bell, but Bush is in a cloud on that depth chart. And, I mentioned that obviously we've seen him be pretty proficient as a receiver out of the backfield. He can block a little bit. The challenge for the Lions is to keep him healthy. He's had injury issues in the past. That's what's derailed any chance they've had at really getting a run game going over the last few years. Obviously, Javed Best looked like he was going to be that guy before his concussion. So they need Bush to be on the field for all 16 games, and he'll just be trying to find a balance between who is replacing him and how often they're coming in for him and things like that. I think we might see I think there's probably still a good chance you see LaShore, short yardage and in the red zone, and probably Bell on an occasional third down here or there. But for the most part, Bush should be on the field, 70-80% of the time.
I thought it was going to be interesting to see how many carries LaShore ends up with. And, Bell, if he gets 50 carries, that's probably a great season for him, assuming no injuries, which this is the Lions. But LaShore, it's not just a second-round pick, but he's a big ball of talent, and literally he's a big man, too. It's just the way he can pound on a defense can hopefully help open up those holes for Bush as well. That's probably just a hopeful fan instead of a objective analysis. But I guess as far as, say, if you were to, I mean, obviously we're not looking for numbers specifics because that'd be a little ridiculous in June. But what would be a good season or a good balance for LaShore touches, say, versus Bush's, just in the running game?
Well, I think it'll come down to sort of like I said, if you're counting on LaShore to be kind of your short yardage guy, your reds, I think that's probably where he'll have the chance to really make some hay in that offense. I mean, he had a decent season last year, and I think it's important to remember he was coming off losing his entire rookie season. So, you know, he came in last year behind in terms of his development and maturation, and I think he did some nice things. But certainly he didn't bring that explosiveness that they wanted, and wasn't great in the pass game, wasn't great as a blocker. So there is a lot that he needs to improve on. I mean, he scored 9 touchdowns last year. If Bush does what he's capable of doing and the pass game doesn't take any steps back, I think, you know, you can sort of put that down as a baseline, because I do think he will get some chances to score touchdowns, you know, and beyond that, honestly, if he's on the field a lot, then that's bad news for the Lions, because they've signed Reggie Bush to be their guy. They don't want to go through these running back by committee situations where you have, you know, LaShore starts one week and Kevin Smith starts another week and Stephon Logan slides into the backfield because they don't have any other guys. I mean, you want your number one guy to handle the load all year, and so if LaShore is playing too much, it's almost like, you know, if you see Sean Hill on the field, you know, there's been a problem with Stafford. There's been an injury or something. And I think it's the same situation with LaShore and Bush.
That's probably a good place then to transition, and I guess we're going to go offensive heavy with you today, because that's what we prepared for.
Well, just like the Lions, man, offensive heavy.
Exactly. So what the next point is, and you kind of touched on it earlier, I mean, there's the two receivers at least that we're kind of hoping one of the two, either Burleson or Broyles, can actually fill in that role opposite Calvin Johnson for, let's at least hope for 14 games. I'm not going to get cocky and ask for too much more than that. But as far as Broyles, it's an explosiveness versus a veteran savvy type deal. I mean, that's the way I'm viewing it myself. What was your take on?
I think we saw last year kind of what the Lions were hoping to see out of Broyles, you know, before the injury, obviously. I mean, he's a guy that can get open and can make catches and can make guys miss after he makes those catches, and that's the type of thing you want opposite Johnson. You want someone that defenses kind of have to be aware of. You know, Burleson's a veteran. He certainly knows how to play the game and does a decent job when he's out there, but I don't think any team is paying extra attention to him. I think they just slide a cornerback out on him, go one-on-one, and that's it. Broyles has a little more explosiveness, and then, you know, the other guy that Burleson's talked up and sounds like is going to get a chance is Patrick Edwards, who, you know, had a bad injury in college, but he's sort of the same mold. He's a smaller guy, you know, 5'9", 170, whatever he is, 175, but he's got that, you know, downfield speed to kind of stretch out defenses, and I think that's what the Lions have been missing. If there's any secret about it, that's what they've been missing at wide receiver. They don't really have anyone. I mean, every deep ball that they complete is just, you know, Johnson going up against 2 or 3 defenders and making a play. They don't really beat teams downfield that often. So if Broyles is healthy enough to bring that to the table, or Edwards, or, you know, if they happen to find something in one of these other guys, Corey Fuller or Matt Willis, I guess, who they just picked up, then again, I think it's similar to last year, where the wide receiver spot's kind of open to be won, at least those 3rd and 4th spots, if not the number 2 job.
Well, kind of following up on that, do any of these guys behind Broyles, Burleson, and Johnson, like you mentioned Patrick Edwards, do any of these guys excite you, the Brian Robisky's, Terrence Austins of the world?
I mean, I think it would be Edwards. You know, Robisky is, I think, you know, kind of the book's out on Robisky as an NFL receiver, and obviously he's still young. Guys can improve, but he hasn't really shown anything that leads you to believe he's going to be a great player in this league at any point. You know, I think Edwards has the potential, he was a very good receiver in college before he got hurt, and it looked like he was headed towards a pretty successful NFL career before all that went down. So, if he can rediscover some of what he had before his injury, I think he's got a chance. Corey Fuller's another guy that I think if you develop him in time, he could be a nice weapon. I don't know that he's going to step in and play. And I don't think you necessarily expect him to as a sixth-round pick. Chris Durham's still around. We kind of saw him make a play or two last year. I don't know that he's going to be anything more than he was. And then, the other guy I kind of mentioned in passing there just a few minutes ago is Matt Willis. And the only reason I even would consider him as a possibility to sort of see playing time is just that he's been in the league a little longer. He played, he had an okay season in 2011 with Denver. He's just been there. This will be his 7th year, I think. So he at least has the experience you're looking for, and he's earned special teams type guy, so he has speed. So it's tough because there's a lot of talent, I think, but I'm not sure the Lions know exactly what they have, and that includes with a guy like Broyles, who they still needs to prove he can stay out there for a whole year.
Yeah, Corey Fuller is an interesting pick. I mean, I liked it as far as value, why not take a shot type of thing. I think the interesting thing is going to be if he can even make the roster. I'm not sure what he can do on special teams. To me, he's a squad guy probably at least the first year. If assuming he clears waivers, which I guess you never really know, but probably could.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his measurements and sort of his speed. I mean, he was a 4.4, some mid-4.4s with his 40 time, and he's got good size. He's 6'2", so he's bigger than really any of the other guys they could pair up with Johnson for the most part. So, from that perspective alone, I think he's intriguing for them, and those are they took him. You sort of see that combination of size and speed and think, all right, well maybe we have something here, and especially. Yeah, obviously Johnson draws double, triple teams, so the other guys are going to be one-on-one. They're going to get openings. So, I mean, I'm with you. I don't think they're counting on him this year. I don't think that anyone should expect him to be on the active route at the start of the season. But if they can hang on to him for a year or two, I mean, compared to Robisky or something, I think the ceiling's certainly higher.
Oh, well, that transition as well. We've got two more topics for you. One's real quick. The other one, you can expound as much as you like. But which part of my crack research was watching NFL Live while laying on the couch, and they were analyzing Reggie Bush's assertion that the Lions could have or should have the number one offense. I mean, to me, the weapons are still there from 2011 when things went well for that offensive line. Obviously, that's a big question mark now, as we've covered pretty in depth. What do you think the odds are of them actually being able to accomplish that goal?
I mean, I think they certainly have a possibility of doing it. Yardage-wise, they were up there last year. They just didn't score nearly as much as they should have. And you mentioned 2011, when everything sort of clicked into place for him, at least for that few-week stretch to get him into the playoffs. They still have a lot of those guys. Bush obviously brings a huge element to the table as someone to kind of balance out that offense. So I think the possibility there for it to happen. Stafford continues to get better and better. That's one of the keys for sure. He can't take any steps back. But the other thing to keep in mind, I think, is that I don't know if the Lions want to be that type of team that needs to have 450 yards of offense every game. I think that's part of why Bush is here. I think they prefer to, if they could win some games 20-17 instead of 35-31, I think they'd be plenty happy doing that. So if everything sort of goes well on defense, I don't know that they want to be as, sort of wide open as they have been in the past on offense.
That's a pretty good answer. They don't want to, but we'll see how it goes.
Right.
Like we said, we went heavy on offense today, and maybe some point we can pick your brain again about defense. But the last question we had for you today was, in your mind, if this season doesn't show marked improvement, is Jim Schwartz going to be able to stay around for the next year? Because Nick and I have pretty different opinions. We wanted to get your take before we started calling each other stupid and all those sorts of things, and not waste your time.
I think the heat is certainly on, not only him, but I think Martin Mayhew too, because as much as the product on the field suffered last year, and Schwartz had almost, I mean, I guess you could almost argue that he cost them the Houston game with the challenge mistake. I mean, the players that Mayhew has brought in, they've hit on a lot. He's done a lot of good things, but they've also had sort of the Titus Young mistakes and guys that haven't really fit the system. So, you say marked improvement, and I think that's probably what it's going to take. I don't know if they necessarily need to make the playoffs this year. It's a tough division. It's a tough conference. A tricky schedule in the second half of the season, but I think they at least need to be in that 8 range and get rid of the off-field troubles for Schwartz and Mayhew to have a really obvious bright future here. Otherwise, it might be back to the drawing board again, because as good as guys like Stafford and Johnson and Bush are, there's always that sort of knowledge in the NFL that the window is relatively small when you have a group of guys that you're relying on so heavily. So I think they would want to address it certainly sooner rather than later.
Well, that was a pretty good answer. We'll accept that. It's your walk-off today. We appreciate you joining us and carrying us while we bumbled through our first interview. So thanks again, Chris Burke of SportsIllustrated.com.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.
Are you looking for an NFL website that doesn't throw rumors against the wall and hope they stick? Then please go to ProFootballCentral.com for up-to-date news and information. ProFootballCentral.com is back and better than ever. We're dedicated to being your #1 NFL fan site, so come check us out at ProFootballCentral.com and experience the difference.
All right, folks. Again, we just want to thank Chris Burke. Really appreciated him coming on, making this first episode that much better. As you can see, the guy knows a couple things about the Detroit Lions and NFL in general, and definitely encourage you to check him out on Twitter. Find his articles on Sports Illustrated. He knows what he's talking about. Anyways,
go ahead.
Well, anyways, I want to circle back because I think there's a bone of contention between us on one particular topic. Jim Schwartz and Martin Mayhew.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and give us your take on the situation?
Well, yeah, it was. I guess for me, it was really great to hear what Burke had to say about Jim Schwartz and how this season plays out, because I tend to agree with him about what it's going to take for Jim Schwartz to keep his job. And let's go off the top and say we want to see Jim Schwartz keep his job, because that means we're seeing what we want out of the Lions this season. But for me, I think we need to see 8-8 or better in order to see any reason for Schwartz to stick around past 2013, 2014.
Well, and I can understand that argument, I guess, but that doesn't mean I agree with it at all. I mean, I think the Lions, this is a franchise that employed Matt Millen for, I don't know, like 45 years or something, and had like 6 wins. I mean, it wasn't, you didn't see any seasons where they went to the playoffs. You actually saw a season where they didn't win a game. Now, granted, that did actually lead to his demise. And I will come with this caveat. If they fail to win a single game, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Jim Schwartz is gone. There, you heard it here first, folks, and only here. Anyway.
We'll go out on limbs like that on this show.
But I honestly, if they go 6-10, I think he's coming back. I think there's been enough of an improvement with this roster, with the talent, that they have to be given one more shot to kind of finish what they're building here.
Are we going to be how long are we going to hold coaches and GMs to the Millen standard? I mean, that's such a low standard. I don't agree with that. I don't like accepting the mediocrity. I mean, we loved what he did in his first year, and last year was obviously a setback injury-wise. Not everything was his fault. But we need to see growth this season in my eyes. 8-8 is growth, I guess. It's a tough schedule. I don't know how we justify 6-10 and say we see this team moving forward with that record.
Well, I could justify it by saying I could see them going 0-6 in the division. I mean, this division it's not going to be the toughest because the NFC West is ridiculous now. But the NFC North is got to be 2 or 2A.
Yeah, that's it. That's definitely a fair discussion between those two divisions, and maybe that's something we'll get into another time. But I can't argue with you on that. The NFC North, that every game is going to be. I mean, that's definitely the toughest part of the slate right there is within our own division.
Exactly. So I mean, you've got 6 games there, and I know, this isn't the type of vibe you can have inside the franchise, and I doubt you're going to hear Bill Ford come out and say, hey, it's okay if they don't win a single game in the division. We're going to stand by our coach. I mean, that'd be ludicrous.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that behind the scenes they can't think the same thing. They can't, we're not going to can them. I wouldn't tell them that. But the drafts have been good. I mean, Ezekiel Ansah is probably more of a long-term guy than a short-term guy, regardless of how much I just gushed about him 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to like about what Schwartz is doing. You love you love the stories of going on to free agents' doorsteps to bring them in and everything. If we sit at 6-10 at the end of the season, and let's say we win 2 divisional games, are we going into the next off season happy with the current state of the Lions, feeling like the team has gotten better year to year?
Well, I mean, we're Lions fans. When's the last time you were ever happy about what they were doing? Okay, maybe once, and that was from Jim Schwartz and Martin Mayhew.
Yeah, and that it was their first year. I guess I don't want to fall back on the Lions trap of being happy to. I mean, are we still the Lions fans that are happy to win 6 games? Or is this a different era of Lions football where we expect 9-10 wins and we expect to be fighting for that playoff spot every season?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but, the New England Patriots were not the New England Patriots till they got to the 2000s. I mean, the Lions aren't going to be there right away either, but this is kind of a building process. And I mean, you got the offensive line that's all young, all, first-year starters, and then 2 veterans. I mean, that's a lot to ask for a team to go to the playoffs when, realistically, they might not win a game until they play the Cowboys on October 27th, Week 8.
Yeah, it's a fair point. The roster is just so young. I mean, I guess, will we see a ton of development out of this young roster and have those, like, couple of years ago when we had so many close losses, but you could tell that the young guys were developing? I just don't want to be happy with mediocrity. I guess I can see your point where if we see these young guys coming together and they're playing tough football games and they're playing for Jim Schwartz and they just can't get them 1 or 2 point victories, maybe we're okay with it. I don't want to see a couple of 6, 7, 10-point defeats, and at the end of the year, we're like, okay, they're young, let's make excuses for them. I guess that's where I'm at.
No, all right. I mean, we can't have them get rolling over and quitting on the coach late in the season. It's like, screw it, we're out of the playoffs anyway. What's the matter? Let's just stay healthy and, get some partying done in the off season or whatever. But as long as there's not losses like the Cardinals lost last year, where if you would have asked me after that game, should Jim Schwartz be back the next year, I probably would have bitten my tongue just because I wasn't sure. It did not look like a team that, they gave a crap.
No, they put forth no effort there, and that was the low point for sure last season, was seeing how the team played in that game.
Well, and that's why, but still, I mean, looking forward to this year. If they only win 5 or 6 games, I'm not happy. But I'm also not pulling the plug and starting all over again. I mean, how's that working for Joe Dumars?
Oh, well, that's another argument for another day. I guess I'm the fire guy because I wouldn't have Dumars in town either. But we'll save that discussion.
Well, you just heard it here first. We'll be starting our Pistons podcast. No, I'm just kidding. But well, all right. I mean, like I said, I don't think we agree on this one. I don't need marked improvement. Well, I mean, I do. but I don't think that's how it's going to work. You'd like to at least see something. I can't fault you for that. But anyways,
we'll see how it plays out. I mean, based on how they play every week, we're going to dissect this, and we'll see how it plays out. Most of it depends on how we see this team playing together. I still stand by. I want to see at least a 500 season to keep Schwartz in town, and we'll continue to disagree about this all year, I'm sure.
I've really painted myself into a corner. I guess I didn't realize, there's going to be more of these shows. They'll happen every week, and I'm going to have to stand by this point. Anyways, we'll move off this topic for now and head over to what's kind of becoming a little bit of a hot topic, that is Matthew Stafford's contract. Now, before all the signings were done and all the off-season moves were made, I was obviously a fan of restructuring the deal because I was completely freaked out about cap space and I'd even be able to sign their draft picks. Now, what's the rush?
I don't see why there should be one. We have this season, we have next season with Matthew Stafford. I don't understand why all this contract talk is suddenly coming to the forefront as an issue right now. I think we need to see Matthew Stafford play out this season before we start worrying about giving him, and I know I'm going to use this phrase, giving him Joe Flacco money.
Yeah, well, Joe Flacco doesn't deserve Joe Flacco money. But I just want you to know something. You just agreed with Drew Sharp. And unfortunately,
no, I didn't.
Unfortunately, hell might be freezing over because I do too. He's already making ridiculous money because that's how the rookie contracts were back then, which we'll get into that probably in another episode. But I don't know what Detroit does from here with these, humongous contracts. And obviously Megatron's locked up. Sue, that's going to be difficult when that comes up too. But Stafford's already making, his cap hit is close to $20 million a year for the next 2 seasons. I think even one, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 23.
Yeah.
See. Yeah, this season is $20.8 million, and then $19.3 in 2014.
So where's the pressure to restructure that? I mean, to get a new deal in place when he's already making more money than most quarterbacks in this league?
Wow, that's a crazy point. I guess I didn't even think about that. I mean, you're going to make more money than Tom Brady. I'm not sure where this stuff is coming from. I don't think it's going to, and I guess this will segue into more about Stafford, but I don't see how it's going to have any effect on the field either. I don't think this is something that's really being worried about too much right now. Well, and I could understand the angle for getting him, extending him if this were next year, when the distraction of, what's going to happen with Stafford after this season, which obviously worked out well for Baltimore. But, this is Detroit. I don't like any distractions. They scare the crap out of me. But that shouldn't be an issue this year. And then, you have us talking on a podcast about it for 5 minutes. Maybe we're the problem.
Yeah, we probably are.
But, that would transition us to, I guess, our last topic that we want to discuss today. And it comes right off of Matthew Stafford, and maybe it's the reason why we should extend him now. Who knows? But the key to 2013, if the Lions are going to at least go 8-8 or get back to the playoffs, God forbid, what player is the key to you?
I don't want to say. I mean, I suppose on every team the quarterback is the integral part, but I don't want to say Matthew Stafford is the key to this season. We've seen him throw for over 5,000 yards 2 years ago and darn near it last season. We know that Stafford can do that. That's not the key to this team getting over that hump. I'm going to say it's someone that you're going to be excited to hear, and that's Ezekiel Ansah.
Oh, yeah. Yep, I like where this is going.
Yeah, well, we need that consistent defensive end that can get to the quarterback. We've had those defensive tackles now in place to cause the pressure, and all the windows are going to be there for Ansah to make plays, and if he doesn't I don't see how this defense holds up, and I'm so scared to go here. But let's go ahead and go there. Ansah is the key, for better or worse, to the Lions season.
You're coming over to the dark side. I like it.
I know.
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, I wrote about this extensively last week. I think I've already said in the podcast at Yahoo. But the main reasons are when Detroit did well and made the playoffs, they had Cliff Averill just creating all kinds of havoc on the outside. What didn't they have last year? They didn't have any outside threat. I mean, Vandy Bosch, like we already said, was basically just going out there, and of course he was giving his all, and I would never besmirch the man for that. But,
no.
Father Time has undefeated for a reason. And
Averill...
Well, with Averill, I'm not sure what the problem was. Maybe the contract was a distraction.
Who knows what it was? But what we're saying here, it almost seems too black and white. When Averill was great, the Lions went to the playoffs. Last season he wasn't good. Vanden Bosch was obviously nothing, and they didn't make the playoffs. If Ansah plays at the level that Averill played at 2 years ago, and no one's saying that he will, but if he does that instantly make the Lions go to the playoffs? Probably not, with the way this season looks with this schedule and how tough this division is. But they're going to be that much more competitive if we can get a great impact out of Ezekiel Ansah right away.
All right, well, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to say this, but my co-host is a wuss. I'll go ahead and bust out that if Ansah plays at the level Averill did, the Lions will go to the playoffs.
You think so?
Well, think about all the small deficits, the close losses. Those are one-play games. And what was it? 6 fumbles that Averill forced that game, or that game that season?
That was a good game.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sure.
I think it was 6. You're right. It was an ungodly amount of forced fumbles. He was all over the place that season. He really was.
Well, and Ansah has, like I've already said, the Y9 is perfect for him. Just keep putting pressure on the defensive end or on the offensive tackle, and Fairley and Sue, you can't not pay attention to them. James Jones just has to show up, basically.
I know. Yeah, we're neglecting him. He might end up being the unsung hero because no one's going to pay any attention to him on the other side of the defensive line.
I don't know that he's exactly he does have decent bursts, but I don't know that he's the type that can do what the Y9 needs him to do, which is get up the field quickly. But he can anchor the run. He can bring some pressure on the other side. But if Ansah can make that one or two plays a game that they lacked last season, or even just at least put some pressure on the quarterback to where he's making mistakes, well, that's still making a play that changes a game.
Yeah, I gotta say, I respect the leaps that you're willing to make in the off season. He is the key to our success, I believe, this year. At least defensively, there's no question. If Ansah plays great, that could be our key to the playoffs. It could be Ansah. You're absolutely right.
Well, and another player that I just kind of want to talk about him a little bit. We've already crowned Ansah the king here. But,
yeah, we sure have. Wow, one podcast, and we are the greatest fans of Ezekiel Ansah.
Yeah. Well, at least I'll never have to worry about anybody talking to me about this again. But another one that is obviously going to be extremely important is Riley Reef. We're talking Jeff Backus. Well, not a legend. Maybe one of the most underrated players to ever play the game, though. Hey, come on, man. I'm trying to pay some respect to that. But
no, I guess we need to. Go ahead. Give how good Jeff Backus was speech.
The guy didn't miss a game for, forever. I don't have the exact numbers, but I know it's quite a long streak. He only missed the one game last year. And to be honest, I went ProFootballFocus.com. I don't know if you use them yet. I love them. It's a great story.
Site. There's so many in-depth statistics on there, but go ahead.
But anyways, the one Rife, I'm going to be screwing up names all year, folks. so bear with us. But Bryce was actually the best run blocker on the team as far as grading out. Most of that was on the right side, though. The one game where his spot started for the injured back he didn't play well. And granted, that was against the Texans, but he wasn't exactly going against Watt.
Yeah, but I don't know how much can we attribute that to him just not being on the left side, not being used to being over there last season. He did all his practicing on the right side, and that's just where he was more comfortable. Let's give him a chance before we get too worried about how it'll be left side versus right side.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'm not saying the kid's already a bust. He's not. He can't be yet. He hasn't even had the chance to do what he's supposed to do. But
right.
He's not going to ease into his duties. The first week, he has Jared Allen coming to town, or maybe they're going there. I'm not even sure at the moment. But regardless, he'll be playing against Jared Allen. And, well, here you go. Not quite rookie. Earn it.
Yeah. At home, he's got Jared Allen. And, yeah, that's definitely no easy way to start your career on the left side. And he's going to get a tough dose that week. And it'll be interesting how he holds up, and if he doesn't, how he handles it. Because week 2 is obviously a lesser opponent in Arizona. How does he rebound if he does play poorly? I mean, it's hard to play great against such a star like Jared Allen.
True, and I can't wait to overreact because that means football will be back.
And, well, that's what we do here, and that's going to be a staple of this podcast is our overreactions to everything Lions.
Exactly. Well said. Well, with that, folks, we want to thank you for listening to the first ever episode of Lions Central Radio. What we do ask is that you pay the price of admission, and that's only to let other people know about the podcast. We speak all Lions, all hour, as you've now come to learn. And if you don't like it, well, give us another chance. I mean, we're just fresh faces coming up here. You might see something great. But anyways, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or the ProFootballCentral.com. We look forward to being here all season. And if you would like to follow me on Twitter, it's at Brandon Alisoglu. That's BrandonAlisoglu.
And same goes here. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Nick Kostora, NickKostora. And don't be afraid to drop in on our official radio Twitter as well, at LionsCentralPFC. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what the audience has to say. Whatever you guys want to spout off about, we might even include it on the podcast in weeks to come. So don't be afraid to let your voices be heard.
Yeah, well said. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk up the good points and give you a shout-out on here. And with that, I think that's all she wrote for the first episode. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to PFC Radio. For news, notes, blogs, and more, log on to pfcradio.com.
Well, this could be a run back from 9 deep for Jacoby Jones. And look at him go. Jones is past the 50, and he is flying inside the 20. What a kickoff return. 109 yards and a touchdown, an all-time record.
I know your dreams. I've been everything you wanna be. Oh, I'm the cult of personality.
Well, there you go. Another show in the can. Thank you so much for everyone for listening to Pro Football Central Radio Show. This is your host, Brian Harrington, signing off. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, PF Central. Email pfcradio@yahoo.com. Send us an email with who you want on the show, who you want on the podcast. We more than will do whatever we can to get whoever you want on. Thank you all for listening to PFC Radio.